The next regulation for VGC has been announced. Starting May 1st, VGC will be playing Regulation Set I, which is going to be a double restricted format, which means players will be able to use 2 restricted legendary Pokemon on a team at the same time. This format is going to run until the end of August, so this is going to be our Worlds format at that. So it's going to be cool to see how teams develop over the course of May to August. Honestly, I'm really curious to see too how this is going to begin for the beginning of Regulation I for the Milwaukee Regional, since that regional falls on the opening weekend of May. Now, most people saw this coming for the announcement with the double restricted, but the real question is going to be, what will we see post-August? Currently, there isn't any confirmation about Generation 10, but we do have the Champions announcement from Pokemon Day, and 2026 happens to be the 30th anniversary, so maybe we'll see a blended format on Champions post-August, but for now, that's just speculation. And plus, Wolf Glick also speculated something similar in his own video on Champions, so it's not really an original thought for me, but you know, I could see it. So getting back on track, what are some of my early thoughts on the format as far as restricted pairs go for Regulation I? I think we'll see a variety of combinations of restricted legendaries, whether it's a physical and special restricted on a team, 2 physical attackers, or 2 special attackers. Since there are so many powerful Pokemon that aren't restricted legendaries, such as the Paradox Mons, the Treasures of Ruin, other lesser legendary Pokemon, and some common Pokemon that are just naturally strong that are able to compete with legendary Pokemon to begin with, such as Incineroar, Rillaboom, and Whimsicott as a few examples, teams will have plenty of options to build with. Also, it should be noted too that in a double restricted format, you don't necessarily have to bring both of your restricted legendaries to every single match. Depending on your matchup, like you might have a better time just bringing 1 restricted legendary and then 3 supportive options. So, you know, that's just a little bit of food for thought. Like, the power level is going to be incredibly strong with 2 restricted legendaries, but I mean, if you have one particular restricted that can handle both of your opponents with some extra support, like, that's definitely an option. So that is definitely a thing that you could consider going into this new format starting in May. Woo! Now, I think when it comes to what restricted legendaries are going to be used to make pairings, some will be more popular than others. Each of the Calyrex forms, Koraidon, Miraidon, and Zamazenta will definitely make strong partners since they naturally perform well on their own. And the great thing about a dual restricted format is some restricted legendaries that don't often perform as strongly on their own can really make a strong partnership with others thanks to the combination of abilities, offensive and defensive coverage, or even supportive options. For example, I think Groudon and Miraidon might be a really strong combination since Groudon can set the sun for a bunch of Scarlet Paradox Mons while not sharing Miraidon's dragon typing and therefore dragon weaknesses, unlike Koraidon, for example. And meanwhile, Miraidon can set up the electric terrain for Violet Paradox Mons. It sets up electric terrain, which Groudon would definitely appreciate, especially if we have to worry about opposing Sun teams with Venusaur or even like Trick Room teams with Amoonguss and Spore. So Miraidon naturally setting the electric terrain for Groudon could be relatively nice, and then that way too, Groudon doesn't have to be concerned about being put to sleep by opposing sleep Pokemon like, say, Venusaur or Amoonguss, as I just mentioned. And meanwhile too, Groudon naturally turns on photosynthesis for the Scarlet Pokemon, while the Violet Paradox Mons are getting their Quark Drive activated by Miraidon, and there's just that nice happy balance of Miraidon being incredibly fast, so it can pivot out into Groudon with a Volt Switch, for example, or maybe we know that there might be a better matchup for Groudon in the back that might be in front of Miraidon, so being able to pivot out Miraidon, get Groudon in safely, that could be relatively handy, just to name one example of one pairing. Now, there's definitely other Pokemon as far as pairings go, and I think some really strong combinations starting off is going to actually be Koraidon and Calyrex-Shadow Rider. Both of these Pokemon are incredibly fast. Koraidon sets the sun. It naturally gets its own attack boost from Orichalcum Pulse. Meanwhile, you typically see Koraidon using physical single target moves like, say, Collision Course and Flare Blitz, while Calyrex naturally complements it by having access to heavy hitting spread attacks such as Astral Barrage and Expanding Force, especially when Psychic Terrain is active. Now, both of these Pokemon definitely like some redirection support. Calyrex and Koraidon both benefit from having Indeedee on the field, since Indeedee can naturally set Psychic Terrain for them. If they wanted to, they could either go for Calm Mind or Bulk Up, respectively. Indeedee can click Follow Me, and with the Psychic Terrain active, they don't necessarily have to worry about priority moves getting around their typings and their speed stat for that matter. So, like, Calyrex doesn't necessarily have to worry about terastallizing away from its 4x Dark weakness if Psychic Terrain is active on the field. And then this way too, Calyrex can go for some massive damage if it's going up against a Pokemon that wants to use Sucker Punch that doesn't necessarily resist Ghost or a Psychic. So, like, if it's going up against a non-Dark type Sucker Punch user, like, Calyrex might be in a really nice position to click Calm Mind or Nasty Plant to boost up its special attack. Indeed, he can redirect away attacks. Calyrex can go for some damage. And on the flip side too, Koraidon doesn't have to worry about, like, say, the likes of Extreme Speed or Ice Shard while it's still in its base fighting dragon typing. So, like, Koraidon can safely bulk up, or maybe it wants to go for a Flame Charge to get even faster, and then just go for some massive damage. So, like, having Indeedee right there could naturally complement these two Pokemon. And another thing too is, like, if you wanted, you could even have Clefairy instead of Indeedee. Therefore, you get Friend Guard support, and then that way too, both of these Pokemon are taking a little bit less damage, which is relatively nice since neither one of them are necessarily the bulkiest Pokemon out there. But having Friend Guard and Follow Me support on Clefairy could be relatively handy to try to patch that up. And plus, Clefairy does get access to the likes of Heal Pulse and Life Dew to restore some HP. And that's not even factoring in your Terra options. Like, if you wanted to go Terra Fire on Koraidon, Clefairy or Indeedee could click Helping Hand. Maybe you feint to your own recoil off of a Flare Blitz. Now Calyrex-Shadow Rider is coming in nice and fresh, and now it can just start finishing things off with Astral Barrage if they somehow manage to tank Koraidon's Flare Blitz, and then Calyrex can naturally get its own boost thanks to Spectre's Grim Neigh. So that's just one strong example that I think could be relatively nice. You could maybe even see the likes of, say, Raging Bolt to come onto the field, and then that way too you could actually have some Photosynthesis boosted Thunderclaps, which could be relatively nice as well. You could have Fluttermane to get a speed boost if you want to maybe double up on your Ghost and Fairy type coverage here. Like, Calyrex doesn't really have the greatest Fairy type coverage, but you do typically see Terra Fairy Draining Kiss at times on a Calm Mind or Nasty Plant set. So I don't know, maybe you want to have like a little bit of speed control for Calyrex and Koraidon. Maybe you do want to have that Fluttermane and have that Icy Wind support there too, and then that way you're one of the fastest Pokemon in the sun. You could slap a Focus Sash on a Fluttermane by chance, and then have Calyrex in the back just to take advantage of the weakened, slower Pokemon at that point. So moving on, let's take another look at another pairing, which is actually going to be Miraidon and either Lunala and Necrozma Dawnwings. I think this can slap. Miraidon paired with either Lunala or Dawnwings is going to be a fantastic time. And honestly, I think games are going to go incredibly quickly with this because Miraidon naturally sets up its own special attack boost thanks to Hadron Engine, not only setting the electric terrain and giving it that 1.33 times boost, but it's also increasing the power of its own electric type attacks thanks to the natural effects of electric terrain. And both Dawnwings and Lunala can be fantastic Trick Room setters, and they're naturally bulky to begin with. Thanks to their abilities, they do take reduced damage. Lunala has Shadow Shield, so when its HP is full, it takes reduced damage from the first hit that it takes while its HP bar is still full. So once you get your HP recovered back up, like if you want to pair a Comfey with this thing, you could just go for Floral Healing and keep restoring your HP, and therefore reactivating Shadow Shield. On the flip side, Dawnwings has Prism Armor, which means super effective attacks are not going to be doing the full amount of damage to it, and that doesn't matter if its HP bar is completely full or not. Terastallization can make either one of these two Pokemon extremely scary, and the other thing about the electric terrain is you can make them even bulkier by pairing an electric seed on them. Miraidon and Lunala/Dawnwings can hit the field at the same time. The seed goes off, they get a defense boost, and then they start clicking Calm Mind with Lunala or Dawnwings here. Now you're getting a special attack boost, a special defense boost. Both of these Pokemon are great Trick Room setters as well, thanks to their natural bulk. And with the electric terrain, if you're playing up against an opposing Trick Room team, well, I'm sorry, Amoonguss and Brute Bonnet, but you're not getting that Spore. Or you're going to click the button thinking that maybe it might work. A Miraidon switches in, electric terrain comes up, bada bing, bada boom, no sleepies for the bats. So that could be really, really nice. And plus, Miraidon having access to Volt Switch and being able to pivot is going to be great for dealing around with Rillaboom. And on top of that, too, neither Lunala nor Dawnwings can be faked out. So if you really want to get Trick Room and Volt Switch off together, like maybe you pair a Covert Cloak onto Miraidon and then have the Seed on Lunala and Dawnwings, and then you just go for the Trick Room button. Now, obviously, if there's a Shadow Rider on the field, you're going to want to Terastallize, so like maybe then just be a little bit conscious, but honestly, I don't think that'll be a bad time at the end of the day. And here's another fun little tidbit. Lunala is base 97 speed. That's exactly the same speed stat as Urshifu, so if you really wanted to, you could bluff the Trick Room option and play towards Tailwind and have a faster mode for Lunala. Like, Lunala with speed under its belt could be incredibly scary too. Like, with perfect IVs and a neutral nature, like, you're going to be sitting at 117 speed, which means you're naturally faster than Shadow Rider without any speed investment if you have Tailwind up and they don't. So you could potentially get the jump on them. You can go for Tailwind, and maybe you go for a Lunala Moongeist Beam right into that Shadow Rider. Maybe, well, they might still Terastallize, but honestly, like, you might be able to catch someone off guard if they're not expecting Tailwind Lunala. They might be thinking you're going for Trick Room. And plus, the other thing, too, is Lunala also gets access to Wide Guard. So really, if you're worried about the Shadow Rider going for Astro Barrage in particular, like, you could protect Miraidon and then have Lunala go for Wide Guard. And Wide Guard protects you from your own spread moves. So, like, maybe you wanted to run Discharge on Miraidon. Well, you can protect yourself from Discharge. Miraidon goes for that, potentially paralyzes the opponents. Like, that could be funny as well. And you also got to look at what your other team options can be. Like, there's definitely plenty of Pokemon that love to have Trick Room up, especially if Miraidon is Volt Switching into them on the turn that your Trick Room setter is activating Trick Room. Like, just for a few examples, both Ursalunas, they love having Trick Room. Iron Hands would definitely love Trick Room, and on top of that, Iron Hands gets access to Quark Drive to give it an attack boost. So right there, you can also have a little bit of Fake Out support by bringing in Iron Hands, and then Lunala could potentially go for another Calm Mind if it needs it. Like, maybe you get the Trick Room up, maybe Lunala doesn't take that much damage. Now you can potentially set up a Calm Mind or potentially go for something else. Iron Hands can come in and Fake Out or just go for raw damage. Like, maybe your opponent has a Fluttermane on the field and you just go for Heavy Slam right into them. Or alternatively too, if you do want to have that speed mode right there, you could have a Whimsicott. Like, Whimsicott Tailwind could be nice. Whimsicott with Fake Tears could be really nice for lowering something's special defense 2 stages. So, like, Lunala, if you do decide to play on a speed mode, you definitely have that option. And then on the opposite side, the Dawnwings mode, like, Dawnwings, while it doesn't get access to Wide Guard or Moonblast, it does get access to Photon Geyser and Expanding Force, so you definitely have strong Psychic type coverage on Dawnwings. Now, Lunala gets access to Expanding Force too, but Dawnwings would hit a little bit harder. I'm pretty sure Dawnwings does have the higher special attack, seeing as it is both Necrozma and Lunala, but Expanding Force isn't really going to matter as much since you are playing with Electric Terrain with Miraidon, so that's where you kind of want to look into Photon Geyser. Photon Geyser uses the attack or special attack stat, whichever is higher between the user's 2 stats, and like Moongeist Beam, this can be used to bypass the effects of abilities as well. So, like, if you're worried about something with, like, say, Sturdy, Photon Geyser or Moongeist Beam can come in and just do some massive damage, especially if you're already boosted up to +1 special attack or even higher. So there is that. And if you really wanted to be insane too and just forego the Electric Seed, you could potentially put on a Life Orb onto the Dawnwings, and then that way too, Dawnwings doesn't have to worry about keeping its HP bar full for its ability to reduce the amount of damage it takes. So there is that to consider as well. So definitely a lot of fun options when you look at Miraidon when pairing it up with either one of the two bats. And really, I've had fun with Miraidon going for Volt Switch into Ursaluna and then having a Farigiraf go for Trick Room. Like having a Lunala do that could be really fun. And plus, there's definitely nothing against bringing a Farigiraf of your own if you really want to have that backup Trick Room mode as well. And even just the ability to negate priority. So definitely some food for thought. And plus, if you did have a Farigiraf on the team, like you could have Helping Hand right there, and you do have those damage dealing options, like I mentioned, between the two different Ursaluna forms and Iron Hands, and even Iron Thorns might be spicy. And one other thing too, I know I'm kind of flipping back and forth between speed dynamics between Trick Room and Tailwind, but Iron Thorns could be spicy. Like Iron Thorns is a little bit faster than Tyranitar. Like Tailwind Cork Drive could be funny with Rock Slide. But another one too that could be spicy is Iron Moth, like with Acid Spray. And then that way too, you don't have to worry necessarily about priority blocking abilities that Whimsicott would necessarily have to worry about, or even Dark types. Like you could just go for Acid Spray off a speed boosted Quark Drive Iron Moth, lower something's special defense 2 stages, and just go from there. So that could be relatively handy. Moving on, our next pairing is actually going to be Zamazenta and Calyrex-Ice Rider. Okay, so there's a little bit of a lot going on with this one here. You got two physical attackers, and normally you'd think, well, that's Intimidate Fodder, but here's the thing. Zamazenta doesn't really care too much about its own attack stats since it primarily wants to use Body Press for damage, and Calyrex can then have a Clear Amulet. So now you got two physical attackers that are relatively safe from Intimidate, so that could be relatively huge. Zamazenta's got that Body Press, so if your opponent thinks they're switching in an Incineroar, well, bam, you can hit the Incin with a Body Press. Calyrex has some great bulk as well, so does Zamazenta. Both of these Pokemon are essentially four-legged tanks, so you have some options. If you want to, you could play a little bit of a supportive option with Zamazenta. Maybe you want to run Wide Guard to protect both Calyrex and Zama from spread moves. Like this could be great for dealing with Precipice Blades, and then that way too, if you're worried about your Calyrex being burned, and run Terra Fire, while Wide Guard would keep you safe from Precipice Blades or Earthquake for that matter, both of which would be super effective damage into your Calyrex. And because Zamazenta would still be a Steel type at that point, like it would also protect it from super effective damage right there. And the other thing too is Water Spout off Kyogre hurts. I cannot stress that enough. Water Spout hurts. Wide Guard says no. Woo! You get your Wide Guard up, that's great. Like if you see Kyogre Tornadus come in and they think they've got you made because Tornadus can make the Kyogre faster than both of these Pokemon, Zamazenta can just throw up the Wide Guard. Calyrex can throw up the Trick Room. Then on the next turn, you could go for a Glacial Lance, just nail the Tornadus, get some decent chip damage into the Kyogre. And then Zamazenta can also chip down Kyogre a little bit more. And now you don't have to necessarily worry about Water Spout. And on the flip side too, maybe they decide they're going to go for Origin Pulse. Well, Origin Pulse isn't the most accurate move. It's something like 80 or 85 accuracy. So like you got some really good odds of dodging it naturally, even if you're just going for the damage to chip down your opponent. And maybe your opponent is in a little bit of an awkward situation. Maybe you have something like, say, a Raging Bolt on your team to begin with. Maybe you don't necessarily have Zama and Cali on the field right away. Maybe you have Zama and Raging Bolt. Well, maybe Kyogre goes for Terra Grass to try to resist Thunderclap. Zamazenta can just throw up the Wide Guard. Raging Bolt can get a Snarl off, get a little bit of chip damage, and then you can have like an interesting option for Calyrex to eventually come in and throw a Glacial Lance at that thing. So you do have that option as well. And another thing too is Zamazenta gets access to both Howl and Coaching for some support moves. And the reason why I mentioned both of these moves is Coaching is an extremely strong move to begin with since it gives the user's partner a +1 attack and defense. It's essentially giving your partner a free bulk up. But on the flip side, you're not giving the user anything with coaching. So if you want to make your Calyrex bulkier or any physical restricted next to Zamazenta for that matter bulkier, you can definitely go for coaching support. But maybe you want to run a little bit of attack investment into your Zamazenta anyways, because ghost types are a thing. Ghost types are immune to body press, so you probably need a second coverage move, and therefore you need to rely on that attack stat a little bit. So now maybe enter Howl. You can go for Howl, and now Zamazenta will raise its own attack stat next to Calyrex. And honestly, Heavy Slam Zamazenta, like that, there's some pretty good weight behind the shield dog right there. Like that is heavy armor right there. Like Zamazenta is gonna have a decent heavy slam most of the time, and getting a Howl boost off is gonna make it even better. So like that could be relatively nice at the end of the day. Like Zamazenta can get its own attack up, and if your opponent thinks they're being clever and then switching in Incineroar to get that Intimidate drop, well, now you just pivot right back into Body Press, or, maybe Ice Rider goes for that high horsepower instead. Maybe you catch that switch right out of the gate, Ice Rider hits the Incineroar, kicks them right in the chest with Glastrier's foot, and just sends them flying into a wall. Like, that could be relatively nice. So there's also that to keep in mind. Now, the other thing, too, here is Zamazenta and Ice Rider, they do have some problems that they do have to be a little bit weary of. Like, Zamazenta is naturally neutral to psychic type attacks. So, like, if Expanding Force is on the field, you're probably going to want to have to commit to running Wide Guard to make sure that you're not getting worn down over time. So, like, maybe having a strong Dark type attacker or Ghost type attacker of your own could be nice to try to deter some Expanding Force users. Like, maybe you want to have Urshifu single strike on your team just to have that priority Sucker Punch or that Wicked Blow. I don't necessarily know how King Gambit will fare in a meta like this with two different restricteds running around, but I mean, King Gambit with Sucker Punch could be relatively nice, and plus you have your options between Defiant making you actually want to get Intimidate for the attack boost. Like, that could be relatively nice. But even Supreme Overlord might be a little bit of a spicy option to have, and then that way too King Gambit gets a little bit of an attack boost based off the amount of allies that it's had fallen. So, like, that could be a fun option. And on the flip side too, Zamazenta itself would benefit from coaching. So, like, maybe you want to have Annihilate, since Annihilate doesn't have to worry about Fake Out naturally, and like King Gambit, it's a Defiant mon. So, like, maybe you have Annihilate Zama hit the field, and then that way too you could have Annihilate but boost up Zama's defense, and now Zama's defense is also gonna make its body press go up in power. So, like, you have that option. You have the attack boost as well, and plus Annihilate is naturally faster than Ice Rider too. So you could, like, have that nice happy ground as well. Like, maybe Zamazenta's been doing a lot of work, Zamazenta faints, now you have Ice Rider come in, but it's not necessarily safe to go for Trick Room. Maybe you just go for that coaching off and Annihilate, get Calyrex that +1 attack and defense boost, and go from there with the Glacial Lance. So you could have that as a option as well. So that's kind of where I was thinking for where Zamazenta and Calyrex end off. And I did mention it too, but Raging Bolt would probably be really good support for these guys as well too, with that priority Thunderclap being a priority special attack. So, like, that could be nice for rounding out your team. Like, maybe you could have these two. Maybe you could have something like, say, Raging Bolt and Fluttermane in the back. Like, Fluttermane could have a booster energy or a focus sash. You could have, like, maybe Assault Vest on Raging Bolt. Rillaboom could be nice for a little bit of terrain control. Or the other thing too is maybe you want to do a little bit of extra damage to things. Maybe you want to chip down their defense before you even move. Like, Chen Pao could be a really fun option, especially since Chen Pao is just as fast as Koraidon and Miraidon and Fluttermane, and it gets access to Ice Spinner. So, like, you could destroy opposing electric terrain or misty terrain for that matter. And even just having a means of removing terrain could be really nice, whereas you naturally want to go Trick Room with Calyrex. So now, like, that could make options for an Amoonguss really viable. Like, you could have Amoonguss. You could also have, like, Friend Guard support, whether it be through Mousehold or Clefairy. And then that way, both of those Pokemon have redirection support. So, like, there's definitely plenty of options to have, and plus you could also have Urshifu Rapid Strike with Ice Spinner and Surging Strikes. Like, if you want to go for like a speedy mode as well, like you could have Torn and Tailwind. Like, there's plenty of different options that you can use for these guys. Like, I think they could be a really, really strong combination at the end of the day. So that's basically 4 different pairings right there. And before we cut the video, I want to talk about some other just Pokemon to make note of and to go from there. So we're going to bring up some other Pokemon and talk about some key points that could be relatively nice. So, unironically, starting off our key points, we're starting off with Giratina. Giratina on its own, well, despite being the lord of the distortion world, it struggles. But honestly, Giratina has great bulk regardless of whether you're looking at Origin and Altered Form. You have a base 150 HP stat. You also have access to base 120 attack and special attack when you're in Origin Form, and 100 in each defense. And then you flip that when you go into Altered Form, with the base 100 in both of your offensive stats and 120 in both defensive stats. Giratina gets access to Will-O-Wisp, so it can burn things and reduce their physical damage output. It gets access to Thunder Wave for some speed control. It gets access to Pain Split, which can keep it on the field and prolong its own longevity. It gets access to Calm Mind to boost up its special attack and special defense, which could be relatively huge. Now, Giratina Origin does lose out on its item slot to have to hold the Grisius Orb to become Origin Form, but it does get a 20% boost to its Stab, Ghost, and Dragon type attacks. So it could be a fun, spicy offensive option, or if you play the Altered Form, you could definitely have an item like, say, Leftovers to give it back a little bit more HP at the end of the day. Giratina also gets access to Breaking Swipe, so while providing a little bit of chip damage, it can reduce the attack of anything that's not holding a Clear Amulet or has an ability that protects it from stat reduction, and also a Covert Cloak for that matter. So like Giratina could provide a little bit of bulky support and chip damage with Breaking Swipe. So there is that for an option as well. And then the other thing here too is with Giratina, you also get access to Telepathy. And on that note, the other Sinnoh restricteds too, very good thing to make note of. So Altered Giratina, both forms of Dialga and both forms of Palkia get the Telepathy ability. Now this protects these Pokemon from attacks used by your ally Pokemon, so you don't have to worry about spread moves doing damage to them, which could be relatively nice depending on how you built your team. So one thing that I thought of was maybe you decided you want to run Groudon, but you don't want to run the risk of Precipice Blades missing, so you've decided to click Earthquake. Well, now you don't have to worry about your Earthquake hitting either of these 5 Pokemon on the field. You're doing some decent damage with Groudon's Stab Earthquake right there, and you don't have to worry about necessarily clicking Protect or using an Air Balloon or even Terra Flying to get around that. So that's going to be relatively nice. Also, you could use Bulldoze as some speed control, and then that way too, like, you're getting a little bit of chip damage across the entire board for both sides of your opponent. Telepathy is protecting one of these Pokemon from that, so they're not taking a speed reduction, which is great for Palkia Origin, since Palkia Origin has a base 120 speed stat. Like, it's not quite as fast as Miraidon or Koraidon for that matter, but with a speed reduction right there, now it can outspeed and start to threaten with its high special attacks as well. So you do have that option right there. If you want to play around with a little Bulldoze tech, like maybe you're running Gouging Fire, like honestly, Gouging Fire with Bulldoze is some really fun tech right there. Like, I really like it. So like, you could potentially do that, like slow some things down and then take advantage of Palkia's speed, or maybe even Dialga for that matter. Like, maybe Dialga just goes up just enough with its speed investment so that certain matchups it can win at a -1 speed drop. So like, you might have something like that. And another thing too is maybe you decided you wanted to double up on your dragon type Pokemon. Maybe you have one of these 5 next to a Choice Specs Miraidon. Maybe you want to click Discharge. Maybe you want to just hit the entire side of the board with that Discharge and try to get the Para if they are unfortunate enough to survive that massive damage coming off of a Terra Electric Hadron Engine boosted Miraidon Discharge right there. So maybe they survive, they get parried, and now Dialga's coming in and doing some massive damage to finish them off. Maybe Giratina's just going in for that breaking swipe. And honestly, it could be fun. I think these 5 Sinnoh restricteds could be really fun thanks to the fact that they have telepathy. And not that you would really necessarily see it, but I mean, Surf is another water spread move right there. Like, while Palkia would be 4 times resistant to it, like, I'm just saying, like, it could be a good way of getting around, say, some water type accuracy problems for Kyogre, like Origin Pulse, for example, or even if you have something that can learn either Surf or Muddy Water, just some food for thought. Now, onto another note right here, let's talk about Solgaleo and Lunala. Both of these Pokemon here should not be immediately discounted right here in favor of the Necrozma forms. Both Solgaleo and Lunala get access to Wide Guard right here. So just like when we were talking about Wide Guard with Zamazenta, Wide Guard is going to be incredibly important because a lot of restricted legendaries do have spread moves, like Astral Barrage, for example, will hurt. Glacial Lance will definitely hurt. Precipice Blades and Origin Pulse, technically they can both miss, but if you can deny them, like, that could be relatively nice. Like, Wide Guard is going to be your best friend in a double restricted format, and maybe you want one of your restricted Pokemon to have it. Maybe you're playing a more committed Wide Guard user, like, say, maybe Hitmontop. Maybe Hitmontop is running Wide Guard instead, and then you have that. Maybe you have Pelipper. And yeah, the little duck that could, because I mean, Pelipper is going to be going into a format with a bunch of restricteds, but I mean, you still see Pelipper in a single restricted format. So, like, I'm just saying, you might still see the Wide Guard. You might see Mean Shao, for example, with Wide Guard. And since Mean Shao also gets coaching, like, you could definitely make a case for that. So, having Wide Guard as a backup option on either Solgaleo or Lunala could be great, and plus their signature moves of Sunsteel Strike and Moongeist Beam do bypass the effects of abilities, so if you are worried about, like, say, Ogerpon Cornerstone with Sturdy, like, you can just immediately ignore that Sturdy right there with Sunsteel Strike and just knock it out. So that could be relatively nice. And plus, both of these Pokemon do have base 97 speed, which is faster than their Necrozma counterparts. So, like, maybe you want to play, like, a balanced form of Tailwind and Trick Room together. You could have that option. But if you want to run Necrozma, you can definitely still run Necrozma. Like, honestly, the Necrozma forms are going to be incredibly powerful. Maybe not base Necrozma, but Duskmane, Necrozma, and Dawnwings, they can definitely do a lot of damage, especially once set up. So, like, Swords Dance, Duskmane can just tear through things, especially since Photon Geyser uses the attack or special attack stats. So, like, you can boost up Photon Geyser, have a strong hitting physical psychic type option off Duskmane, and meanwhile, Dawnwings too. I know we talked a lot about it with Miraidon, but, like, maybe you're playing it with a psychic terrain and different restricted. Well, now you can have a Calm Mind boosted Expanding Force do massive damage to stuff too. So, like, you could technically do that too. And plus, Photon Geyser is similar to Sunsteel Strike and Moongeist Beam as well. Like, it does bypass abilities, so you can just ignore that. So really, if Wide Guard isn't make or break it on your restricted, like, you could run Duskmane or Dawnwings too. Like, honestly, between Solgaleo, Lunala, and Necrozma, all 3 are incredibly powerful options as well. So, like, you really shouldn't look at one over the other. Like, I think it's fair to assess both when you're looking at what your team wants to do between this kind of stuff right here. Like, really, am I boosting up my Dawnwings? Yes. Excellent. Am I boosting up my Lunala? Yes, excellent. Like, they can both do massive damage. What do I want to do? Do I want to go Trick Room? Do I want to go Tailwind? Maybe I want to go Tailwind. Well, maybe it might be better to go with Lunala over Dawnwings in this case. Am I going Trick Room? Well, maybe depending on what I want to do. If it's hard trigger, maybe I want to go Dawn Wings instead of Lunala. Like, just food for thought when it comes to that. And then another thing too is when you think about it, Koraidon, Miraidon, Groudon, Kyogre, they all set really powerful field conditions. So maybe you might want to consider bringing Terapagos to your team just to try to get around that. Like when you click Terra Stellar on Terapagos and go into your Stellar form, you do change your ability to Terraform 0, and that does give you that one-time field clearing effect. But maybe you don't necessarily want to commit your Terastallization to Terapagos. Rayquaza could be a good option to consider because Airlock would shut off the effects of Sun and Rain from Groudon, Kyogre, and Koraidon. So Koraidon and Groudon, their fire type attacks are going to have less damage from the Sun not necessarily working, and then Kyogre's water type attacks are not, it's not going to benefit from the rain either. So like you do have that Airlock ability with Rayquaza, and then when it comes to Miraidon, sure, you're not removing the electric terrain, but a Choice Banded or Sword Stance boosted Rayquaza with extreme speed could definitely threaten Miraidon because you're not only circumventing Miraidon's speed, but I mean, Miraidon doesn't really have the best physical defense. Like, it's got respectable defense, but it's not necessarily as durable as Zamazenta or Ice Rider for that matter. So, like, if you get Rayquaza boosted, and I know I'm flipping back and forth between Rayquaza and Rayquaza, but anyways, point is, if you get boosted and there's no abilities on the field that are canceling out priority, like Extreme Speed, even Terra Normal Extreme Speed, that could definitely threaten Miraidon right there. So really, Rayquaza could be a respectable option to consider for that. And finally, I think the last Pokemon that could definitely benefit from a format with this, with having a fellow restricted, could be Ho-Oh. Ho-Oh is a really powerful fire option right here. So if you have it paired next to Koraidon and Groudon and naturally give it the sun, like Sacred Fire could be extremely scary. Or even if you're not going with a Sun Setter and maybe you're going with Zama and you have Zama with coaching support right there, Ho-Oh is going to get extremely scary that way with that +1 attack boost. And Sacred Fire just naturally has incredibly high rates of burning the target. So it doesn't necessarily matter if you're going for neutral, super effective, or resisted damage. Like if you're firing off Sacred Fire and your opponent doesn't have a Covert Cloak or they're not a fire type, like you've got really good odds of burning them and reducing their physical damage output. So really, that could be really nice. Like any steel type Pokemon would have to consider terastallizing just to avoid the Sacred Fire, not only for the super effective damage, but also for the burn odds. Like your opponent might be running Zamazenta. Well, they don't want to get burned. They don't want the physical damage output being reduced by getting burned right there. If they're running Zacian, well, Zacian definitely doesn't want to eat a Sacred Fire. Like Zacian, while it can threaten Ho-Oh, if Zacian doesn't take it out, Ho-Oh's got its name right there with that Sacred Fire. But yeah, anyways, I've gone on more than long enough for this. I'm going to leave it there. There's definitely plenty of other options for restricted pairings. Don't get me wrong. We're going to see a lot between now and the end of August as far as different team dynamics go. And I'm really excited to see what might come up. So let me know what you think of some restricted pairings that I covered today. Let me know of some other options, like some cores you might see. I know Chi-Yu with Miraidon and Shadow Rider is absolutely disgusting sounding, but I could realistically see that too. So yeah. Anyways, thanks for listening. See you later.